Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for June 20th, 2025. Today, we're going to start off in Utah, where on Father's Day, the women of a Saratoga Springs ward orchestrated a massive prank, surprising about 60 men with matching ties for church. Inspired by social media trends, Paige Anderberg Sosa coordinated the effort, collecting money and discreetly distributing ties to participating households. Despite some initial resistance from men with their own Father's Day tie traditions, the women successfully convinced their husbands to wear the identical ties. The wives enjoyed a hilarious experience trying to contain their laughter as they saw the unity unfold, with men of all ages showing up at church, all wearing the same tie. Reading this reminded me of this Reddit post that I saw that said this. Back in the day, say 30 or 40 years ago, Mormonism actually had something going for it: community. Wards were real villages. If you were a kid, there were dances, roadshows, scout camps, firesides, temple trips, youth activities every week. You weren't just going to church because you believed every word. You were going because your whole life was stitched into it. Friends, fun, family. It was messy and weird sometimes, but it was alive. Now, it's dead. The church killed it. They gutted the Boy Scouts, they threw out road shows and youth conferences, they strangled ward activities until they barely exist. Today you're lucky if there's a potluck every 6 months that isn't just a sugar cookie on a paper plate. Youth activities are occasional and corporate. Goals you set by yourself: a yearly FSY conference where 1,000 kids sit through a pep talk, and a bishop interview to ask if you're still clean. The whole point now is to stay busy enough to feel guilty and not busy enough to feel connected. And it's not an accident, it's a strategy. The church has moved from building belonging to demanding obedience. It's called the loyalty model. They don't want a big church full of semi-active, semi-believing families. They want a smaller church full of temple recommend holders who do exactly what they're told. That's the real game. And when you build a church around loyalty instead of community, something else happens. The great filter of empathy kicks in. See, empathy is dangerous to a system based on authority. Empathy asks the wrong questions. Why are LGBTQ kids still treated like lepers? Why are bishops still interrogating sexual assault victims? Why are women still pushed to the sidelines? Why are doubters still treated like they have a disease? Empathy notices when loyalty is used as a club to beat people down, and anyone who feels that tension, really feels it, can't stay forever. They either walk out, get slowly starved out, or get shoved out with a smile and a "we'll pray for you." So who's left? Mostly the ones who are good at looking the other way. The ones who value obedience over compassion. The ones who think staying pure is more important than staying kind. Anti-queer, anti-intellectual, conservative, incurious. Exactly the kind of self-satisfied crowd nobody in their right mind wants to worship with. And the final insult, the thing they now worship, is dead works. Temples used to mean something, kind of. They were rare, special, tied into community milestones. Now they're cranked out like McTemples on every available lot. Members are herded inside to perform rituals for people who are already dead. Dunking each other in fonts, reciting scripted lines in borrowed clothes, pantomiming salvation for strangers' names printed off a database. It's busy work that serves the dead and robs the living. It's the perfect metaphor for what the church has become. Frantic, repetitive motions to look righteous, while the living soul of the place quietly rots. The house still stands, but it's hollow. The lights are still on, but most of the people have checked out emotionally or have left for good. I thought that was very beautifully written, and when I think about it, I can see that the church of my youth is not the church that people are experiencing today, and some of those ways aren't better. Getting rid of youth dances and roadshows and pageants has taken a lot of the fun out of Mormonism. A few days ago, I talked about Mormon pageants, and today I have even more information, this time from a listener of this program. Let's meet Lynn Bodily. He was the director of the City of Joseph pageant in Nauvoo, Illinois for all 29 years of its run. He was described as having the ability to visualize the outdoor 5-level stage and bring it to life with a cast of over 600. A Church News article described the pageant this way: "Time stood still for a moment as an audience seated above the Mississippi River in the shadow of the Nauvoo, Illinois temple watched on August 7th the final and farewell performance of the memorable City of Joseph pageant. For 29 years, the story of Nauvoo has enthralled appreciative audiences. As this pageant concluded, approximately 1 million people had seen and heard the portrayal of the restoration of the gospel. One spectator, John Broadman, professor emeritus from Culver Stockton College in Canton, Missouri, never missed the pageant and never arrived to see City of Joseph without bringing friends with him. What you people have done in Nauvoo is spectacular. Your lights, scenery, your music, and the families mingling with the audiences are all so impressive, he exclaimed. He said that he had told many people about the pageant and encouraged them to see it. Now let's read what the listener had to say about their experience with the Nauvoo pageant. They said, "I had an awful experience watching Lynn's behavior." Now remember, Lynn was the director for the 29 years that the pageant was going. Lynn's behavior one afternoon during a rehearsal. Lynn was very flamboyant and extremely cruel in his criticism of cast members who weren't performing exactly what and how he demanded of them. As a single gay member of the church, I knew that Lynn had to be married because the church would never allow a single man to be in his position. Had I have been anywhere else in the secular world watching the rehearsal of a different theatrical production, my comment would have been, "Wow, this queen is so out of control. What an asshole." I really don't want to stereotype his behavior of being flamboyant and effeminate, indicating he was gay, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt as just a flamboyant, effeminate straight man. Lynn literally threw tantrums, screaming at cast members demanding that they get it right. He would be flitting around, acting as though he was a god directing cast members. I'm surprised that he wasn't able to throw lightning bolts at the disobedient, inept subjects he loomed over. I was absolutely disgusted watching Lynn's behavior as though he was some sort of theatrical dictator. I wish I had never gone that afternoon to watch the rehearsal because it drained any spiritual ambiance I had heretofore experienced. In subsequent performances, the City of Joseph pageant was never the same as I could always envision this screaming, tantrum-throwing director posing as a Latter-day Saint and getting paid to do so. Hearing this from a listener brought up a memory for me of when I met Jeffrey Holland in person. I was a very active, very believing member at the time. I knew I was going to be meeting him, and I was excited and nervous. I had heard so many spiritual experiences from people who had met apostles. When the moment finally came and I got to shake his hand and talk with him, I felt nothing. He just seemed like any other normal old dude. Behind the shiny exterior that the church cultivates is just a bunch of normal people, and not all of them are very good people. Now let's go to the church news, where it says, "With joy and gratitude, thousands of Latter-day Saints and their friends celebrated the 100th anniversary of the official beginning of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in South America. Around 4,000 people filled an arena in Santiago, Chile on Saturday, June 14th to watch the program full of music, dances, and messages, while around 10,000 others watched online from throughout the country. Bringing the greetings and love of the First Presidency with him, Elder Gary E. Stevenson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles paid tribute to pioneers of the church in Chile and invited all to rejoice in the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ." Hold on, I thought it was an ongoing restoration. I'm surprised they didn't add that word in there. "I testify that priesthood keys have been restored in this dispensation," he said. "I bear witness of Jesus Christ. I bear testimony that he is the Son of the living God, the Savior of the world." In that sentence, he testified that priesthood keys have been restored. Can you imagine what would happen if President Nelson came out and said there were additional keys and he got a revelation to restore them? I wish he would. It'd be kind of cool. The article goes on to say, "This year marks 100 years since South America was dedicated for the preaching of the gospel. In late 1925, Elder Melvin J. Ballard offered a prayer in Buenos Aires, Argentina, blessing the continent. Then, in 1926, he prophesied that the church would grow as an oak grows slowly from an acorn, small and slow at first, but increasing in size and strength. Thousands will join the church here," Elder Ballard said then. If joining the church is signified only by baptism, then he's right, because many people have been baptized into the church in South America. The article says today almost 4.4 million members of the church live in South America in nearly 5,600 congregations. As always, we need to interrupt here to do the math. 4.4 million divided by 5,600 is approximately 785.71, which means that the meeting houses in South America better be gigantic because they have to fit over 700 members each week. The article then says, each country in the Church's South America South area, Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, is holding events to commemorate the 100th anniversary, such as large cultural celebrations, service activities, and 100 humanitarian donations throughout the year. At the Saturday event in the National Stadium Park of the Ñuñoa commune in Santiago, Elder Stevenson invited Chilean pioneers of the church and those who were among the first missionaries from the country to stand. Children of some of the first members in the country also stood to loud applause. "We love you and are grateful for the legacy of your families," Elder Stevenson told them. "We recognize each and every one of you." A video highlighted the growth of the church in South America. Elder Stevenson said in Chile specifically, "Your vineyard has grown to over 600,000 members and 570 congregations. All of this began one member at a time, and it continues in the same way." Oh wow, this math is even worse. Why do they keep throwing these numbers out there as if they're a brag? 600,000 divided by 570 is approximately 1,052. The congregations in Chile are huge. The article then says, South America historian and author Mark L. Grover wrote to the Church News that one of the two most important missionary events of the church was the sending of apostle missionaries to Great Britain in the 1840s and 1850s. The second event is the evolution of the church in Latin America, beginning in Mexico in the 1870s, but later the beginning in Argentina in 1925. The growth was slow, but after 1975-1980, the expansion was so great that the growth in Latin America changed the church, Grover said. The two American continents represent 80% of the baptized members of the church. For that reason, I believe that 1925 is a watershed event in church history, not for what happened in that year, but what occurred many years afterward. I can say with certainty that a large portion of those baptized members do not attend church at all. And if they make up 80% of the baptized membership of the church, the number of active members is likely quite low compared to the over 17 million that the church claims. Now let's go to a post from Latter-day Saint Women's support group on Facebook that says, "How do you deal with someone who is a rude, arrogant person, always getting put in higher callings? He was in a stake presidency, then a college bishopric, and is now in a mission presidency with some of the same people, so it seems like it's just his buddies picking him, which makes me think they must be like him. He's totally two-faced and puts on a show for everyone, but in private, he's a real jerk, talking behind people's backs, mocking people he deems less cool than him. He's arrogant and a real alpha male, looks down on women, minorities, and poor people. He always posts on social media about the positions he's been called to and says it's an honor to be given such important and esteemed roles, which I guess is fine, except I know he's arrogant and this is just feeding his ego. Everything else on his social media is a humble brag. It probably doesn't look too bad unless you know who he really is. How do I get over my frustration that no one sees who he really is? At least no one in the church making these decisions. Most of his family and neighbors know and want nothing to do with him. Is it really God's will?" This was something that I wrestled with in the years before I left the church because I had seen so many heinous things be excused by people's bishops, including my brother-in-law, who sexually abused my younger sister, was given a slap on the wrist, and although he offended again after, is still, as far as I know, received in full fellowship in the church. So is it really God's will? No. Like I said before, when you look behind the curtain of the church, behind that shiny exterior, it's just a bunch of normal people, some of which aren't very good. And last up to date, let's finish with this quote from Dr. Maria Paredes, who says, "Reminders, people in a cult or cult of thinking don't typically know they're in a cult. They think they are the holder of the truth. They think of themselves caught up in a battle between good and evil. Example, anyone who thinks believes differently is by default bad. And they default to binary thinking, evasiveness, projection, and excommunication or ostracization." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.